Welcome to Craftlit, the podcast for crafters who love books. My name is Heather Ordover, and I'm podcasting from where the Delaware River meets the Old York Road, New Hope, Pennsylvania. Episode 571. If you can't say something nice. This episode of Craftlit is brought to you by you. Thank you. Well, hello. How are you? I am well. I have finished a very long day. I'm glad about that. I'm about to get on the call with the other Craftlit folks on Thursday night. Will you be there? I hope so. I just listened to something that made me smile like a complete and utter goofball. So before I go any further, I'm just going to play you the audio of the voicemail from Kim Zuckert. So here we go.
Hey, Heather, Kim Zuckert calling. I just sent you a message that I will reiterate here. You mentioned Nancy Drew going into the public domain. It goes into the public domain 2025. And I will fight anybody who also wants to narrate it because I will narrate it. So if it has to be a fight to the death, I mean, it would be unfortunate if it was a fight to the death. So let's not fight to the death. But whoever also wants to do it, I dibs first. So see y'all in 2025, or hopefully before that. Hopefully there'll be something that I can read before that. But then the other thing was farther into the episode that I'm currently listening to, which you mentioned looking at the OED, and then you said something like, oh, there was something that I've always been confused about forever, and now I know because of the OED, and I thought, actually I said it out loud in the car, bet it's nonplussed, and then you said, and it's nonplussed. And I knew it was. It's one of those words that it's easy for even intelligent, educated people to get wrong because it's so often gotten wrong. It's one of those things that when people get it wrong, it makes me crazy. I once heard it wrong on NPR, and I'm like, NPR, you should know better. But the way I always remember it is by acting it out. And it's, I am nonplussed like that. All hesitant like that means I am at a loss for words. And you won't ever think it means the exact opposite if you think I am nonplussed. See? Acting. Anyway, I'm loving the Leavenworth case. It's swell. Having a great time listening to Mr. Green read it.
All right, so I believe in classic literature speak, the gauntlet has been thrown, or the gauntlet down upon the floor has been thrown. I don't know. Aiden, thing two, is now studying Hamlet. And so I'm kind of in a Shakespeare mind. He finally got to Hamlet, guys. I'm so excited. And he's being so pompous about it, but in a good way, because of Aaron Ziegler. He watched the David Tennant Hamlet, and his response, I believe at the time, was, that was really good. Why do people not like this? I kind of love that about kids. Like, it's very easy for them to just look at several hundred years of history, or at least decades of history, and shrug and say, yeah, I don't know what their problem was. That was really good. Without, knowing just how many bad Hamlets one would have to see in order to arrive at the good Hamlet, which I agree with Aaron Ziegler. The David Tennant one, wow, just so much better. I even said to him, listen, if your teacher won't show anything else, just beg her to show the gravedigger scene on my recommendation, like without having to pre-watch it. Just show it, because it finally makes sense. I will find out tomorrow if this has happened. So one can hope. I will actually be finding out about that when you are listening to this. So there it is. Hamlet, Aaron Ziegler. Yeah, It's been a week of deep sighs and little sleep. But on the good side of things, Andrew got to go to New York City and see friends of ours from, wait for it, back when we lived in Brooklyn/Croton. So, see, I know that's taken you back too. So these are people who we have known for that long, who, we've all kind of wended our way around the last 20 years. And he was able to go up and visit and see people last night. And he spent the night in New York City, and everything was outdoors. And it being the autumnal season, everything was wonderful temperature wise. And it was just lovely. And so I get to see all these pictures of people who I used to work with. And it makes me so happy to see Andrew out there among them. It feels like an even longer time because of COVID, but it's been a long time just in general, since so many of them have been seen by one of us. And Andrew actually worked on a day-to-day basis with most of these people, a lot more than I did, because I wound up working from home with them a lot longer. So it was good that he got to go up. It made me very happy. And I keep trying to think of things, before the weather turns and it gets really bone crushingly cold and one can no longer go out of the doors to go do the eating thing. I am trying to figure out, what are the things that I am going to be really, really desperate to do in this second winter of our discontent. And I'm doing as much as I can. I am definitely walking every morning out of the doors, out in the nature. And on the weekends, I walk even longer and further. Sometimes I have to fool myself into saying, no, 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 really, I'm just going to go out and paint. I'm just going to paint a very long way from where I'm at right now, so that the walk doesn't seem so much as a walk as it is there's a goal. And then there's coming back from the goal. And so far, that seems to be working pretty well. So that's nice. I've also found Etcher Labs, ETCHR, not ETCHER, because that would be spelled correctly. This is kind of like old school LinkedIn. This is ETCHR. It appears to be, I have not done my due diligence on this, people. It appears to be a European based company that collects really interesting artists and then produces two different things. One is free on YouTube mini tutorials. They will walk you through very quickly, but with enough detail that you can get something out of it, tutorial about how they approach or how they construct or how they complete a certain kind of art. A lot of it seems to be watercolor, although that may just be because that's what I'm responding to. I'm not entirely sure about the algorithm. And then during that time, they pimp out the fact that this particular artist is hosting a real workshop, at which point you might groan. I did the first time, and I thought, all right, so this was a vehicle to sell somebody's expensive class. I get it. And actually, I'm getting something out of this freebie, so fine. Go ahead and pitch the sale for the larger, more expensive thing. Here's what I've learned. Etcher charges almost $6.50 US for one of the longer, and by longer I mean like 2-hour workshops. That's right. An entire almost $6.50. So yeah, I finally caved and did that. Now the replays of these, if you don't do it in real time or pay for it up front, the replays retroactively can cost more. But if you do them in real time and either attend or you pay for it up front and then you can't attend, but you get the recording after for the $6 and almost 50-cent charge, the replays, if you get it retroactively, are more expensive. That said, you're not missing anything except getting immediate responses to comments that you make from the professional who's doing the course. You just have to pay more for it. You can pay less to get immediate feedback and even be able to show your products to the professional. and pay more for later when you can't get a response. It's kind of clever because most people aren't going to be able to show up at 3 in the afternoon Eastern time in order to take a class, including me. But that's okay, because if you sign up and you can't go, you still get the recording for $6 and almost 50 cents. They have a whole mess load of things. They also have supplies that they sell. Those are not cheap. At the same time, even though they are not cheap, they ship these things out to the people who are going to be teaching the classes. Again, very smart, and encourage, but don't require them to use these supplies while they're teaching. And the one thing that I've seen over and over and over and over again is the artists who are teaching these courses, when they use the Etcher sketchbooks, all of them universally have said, wow, the sketchbook paper quality is extraordinary. It's 100% cotton, 140 pound, 300 GSM. Stupendous. Really, really good paper. Those suckers are expensive. So, just saying. I have no idea if there's a discount if you're in the European market or not. I only know of the United States dollar charges, and they're really expensive in the United States. So I'm sticking with Dick Blick, to be completely honest. I've been very, very happy with Dick Blick's 100% cotton watercolor paper, cold press, for anybody who cares. I'm finding that to be pretty darn good. Have I knit? Yes, I have, but only on the same pair of socks that I continue to knit on because it is sitting next to my desk. Well, one of the two socks is sitting next to my desk so that when I have to attend any kind of a training where I have a hard time paying attention, I have my knitting next to me. And so I continue to knit in the round, vanilla sock, but it's still very comforting. And having it next to me, it also makes it possible for me when I'm doing a training to pick it up off of the shelf next to me and show it on the camera to people who apologize for having a hard time paying attention. And it's very easy to say, I get it. Here's what I have to do. Some people doodle. Some people have fidget toys like this one that Erin found from Bethlehem Steel. And it's very interesting to watch people just calm down. I don't actually think it's the knitting that calms them down at that point because it's not tactile for them. It certainly calms me down. But I think knowing that they're not crazy and that things like that helps makes them all happier, as it does all of us. So it's good, right? I do wonder if knitters and crocheters and spinners and weavers and crafters and artists of any sort have quantifiably, qualifiably done better during the age of COVID than other people have. I wonder if somebody's going to do any research on that. Geez, I wonder even how you would do research on that. It's not like you can go back and study people's cortisol levels like they did with the World Trade Center Health Registry. Let's see, they must have gotten a hold of us. We were still in Brooklyn. So they must have gotten a hold of us by November 2001 and got us to choose on those cotton tubes, the cotton cylinders that they'll put on the side of your mouth during oral surgery, or if they have to do a filling and they want to soak up as much of your spit as they can with the cotton. Yeah, they had us chew on those for, I don't know, we were supposed to chew on them for 5 minutes and then stick them in a bag, in a little baggie, a sterile baggie that they sent us, stick them in the freezer. And then once they were completely frozen, we were supposed to send them back to, I think it was Columbia University that was doing the research. Anyway, they were trying to track cortisol levels to see how stressed people who were down near the towers were shortly after the events of September 11th, 2001. And they did. They got some interesting data. Lots of crazy data coming out about COVID. I'm not at a point yet where I'm going to say trust this, because I'm seeing a lot of non-peer reviewed journal articles being quoted in the press. So I am withholding from you in order to be responsible. At least I can be responsible here. I can't always be responsible anywhere else, but here I'm good. Although I have no idea if you can hear Aiden singing in the background. He's recording another song he wrote. He continues to write songs, which is wonderful, and they're great. And I have no idea how to help him find a manager or anyone who can help him complete and get his music out in front of everybody. It feels like we're so far away from the land of Justin Bieber as a 5-year-old that it feels a little disheartening sometimes, I know, for him. But at the same time, his music's really good. So I don't know. Our little blockhead has grown up. And our little Doofus del Fuego, who is in college, he's no longer Doofus del Fuego. His name is Danny. His head is still on fire. But Aaron continues to use those characters in a series, and he's actually going to use that set of characters for his junior thesis. So you heard it here first, folks. Doofus del Fuego has graduated. Blockhead is still there. Blockhead is now a chaos god, trapped in a cardboard box. Doofus del Fuego is now Danny. His head is still on fire. He's very confused. And it's a very funny little script he's written up. And it's a series. He has conceived it as an actual series. And you heard it that way on Craftlit before anyone else did. So congratulations. That is a completely dubious honor, I know. But it is still an honor from my family to yours. All right, Leavenworth case. What's going on with Leavenworth case? So many cool things are going on, is what it comes down to. We last week had 2 chapters that ended with Thomas not being helpful in identifying the guy who visited before. This week, we start with a quotation from Les Miserables. You will hear that quotation, and then I will tell you what that means in English as best I can. Those of you who actually speak French, please call in 206-350-1642 and give a real translation of this. I've used Google Translation and then checked with a couple people who took French in the United States. I am not at all confident that they know what they're talking about. So we will have to rely on you at a later date. It starts with a quotation about women. And aside from knowing that this chapter is going to have something to do with women, the other thing I wanted to let you know about, actually, there were 2 things. The first is you are going to hear the word sophistry used in the chapter today. We only have 1 chapter, it's a long one. And you're going to hear it used pejoratively. It sounds like an insult. No sophistry can stop this nasty thing from happening. I went into the OED, and this time I went into my book, my paper books with the magnifying glass and the whole 9 yards. And it's very interesting because sophistry definitely has negative connotations. Sophistry is employing intentionally deceptive arguments in pursuit of your personal goal. It's employing cunning or trickery. It is a negative word, sophistry is. But if you look up sophist, this will not surprise anybody. It actually refers to the sophists, who were Greek philosophers who were very good at arguing, like legit arguing, not nasty logical fallacies, but actual argumentation in a classic sense. So somewhere between sophists being human people engaged in creating good, sound, strong, well-constructed arguments, and now, between those 2 time periods, somebody, a lot of somebodies, started to feel like good, solid, strong arguments were trickery. I'm finding this to feel very familiar right now. But the thing that's interesting about it is there's 2 ways that could have gone. It could have been that people who sounded really smart started using their ability to sound like they were making a logical argument as a foundation for tricking other people, which I totally can see happening, which leaves the people who really are making good arguments kind of out in the cold and out of luck. Because then people learn, it's a learned behavior. They learn, unfortunately, to distrust educated arguments. And that is bad for everybody. That's the equivalent of we don't trust, we hate elites. Who are the elites? Well, people like doctors and lawyers, educated people, experts in their field become the elites. And then you would rather trust the snake oil salesman on the corner rather than somebody who actually knows what they're talking about. So I found it very interesting that sophistry showed up today, and that seemed to be the way the word transformed from something that had a positive connotation, sophist, into something that had a negative connotation, sophistry. And if I've gotten this wrong, and because this has to do with philosophy, it is very possible that I've gotten this wrong. Please call in. Once again, that is 206-350-1642 and set me straight. Because looking at the OED and the two definitions side by side and looking at when the years were that these words were being used, this is the conclusion I came to. And and it could be totally wrong. So please educate me if you know the answer to that, because now I'm really, really curious. There's another word that you don't hear very often. We hear the word derogative. We don't so often, at least I don't so often, hear the word derogate, which is the action of disparaging somebody. If you derogate them, you disparage them. The other variation, it's a slight variation, is that you could be repealing something. So you could disparage something, kind of tear it down. You could also tear it down in a way that repeals at least part of whatever it is that you are trying to hammer away at. I am about to do something that is rather radical in the world of craftlit. I can only think of one time where I did anything even similar to this. I could be totally wrong, but I think it goes back to Tale of Two Cities. And that was when we had a chapter that was so complicated that I actually broke into the chapter to point out things that Dickens was doing on purpose that had repercussions that actually mattered. I think that was Tale of Two Cities. I'm not going to break into today's chapter. There's no need for that, but I am going to make a preemptive strike against this chapter because it's been a while since we listened to chapter 6. Something's overheard in chapter 6 by Mr. Raymond and Mr. Gryce. And what they overheard, they couldn't identify who said it. They know it is one of the two young women. There is a reference that comes up midway through today's chapter, calling back to that moment. I did not remember what it was that was said, and so my assumption is that you won't be able to either. So before we get any further, we are going to play for you this one little clip from chapter 6 in the Leavenworth case so you can hear our lovely Mr. Green. I'm so glad you like him too, Kim. Our lovely Mr. Green reading this chunk for us, and then we're going to get on with the new stuff. So first, hearken back to the dulcet tones of Kevin Green in chapter 6.
Pausing only long enough on the threshold to compose myself for the interview, I lifted my hand to knock when a rich, clear voice rose from within, and I heard, distinctly uttered, these astounding words: "I do not accuse your hand, though I know of none other which would or could have done this deed, but your heart, your head, your will, these I do and must accuse, in my secret mind at least, and it is well that you should know it." Struck with horror, I staggered back, my hands to my ears, when a touch fell on my arm, and turning I saw Mr. Gryce standing close beside me, with his finger on his lip, and the last flickering shadow of a flying emotion fading from his steady, almost compassionate countenance.
All right, so now your mind has been refreshed, and we are ready to listen to chapter 17 of The Leavenworth Case by Anna Catherine Green, read for us by Kevin Green from LibriVox. Here we go.
Chapter 17. The beginning of great surprises. Vous regardez une étoile pour deux motifs, parce qu'elle est lumineuse et parce qu'elle est impénétrable. Vous avez auprès de vous un plus doux rayonnement et un pas grand mystère, la femme. Les Misérables. And now followed days in which I seemed to make little or no progress. Mr. Clavering, disturbed perhaps by my presence, forsook his usual haunts, thus depriving me of all opportunity of making his acquaintance in any natural manner, while the evenings spent at Miss Leavenworth's were productive of little else than constant suspense and uneasiness. The manuscript required less revision than I supposed, but in the course of making such few changes as were necessary, I had ample opportunity of studying the character of Mr. Harwell. I found him to be neither more nor less than an excellent amanuensis, stiff, unbending, and sombre, but true to his duty, and reliable in its performance. I learned to respect him, and even to like him, and this too, though I saw the liking was not reciprocated, whatever the respect may have been. He never spoke of Eleanor Leavenworth, or indeed mentioned the family or its trouble in any way, till I began to feel that all this reticence had a cause deeper than the nature of the man, and that if he did speak, it would be to some purpose. This suspicion, of course, kept me restlessly eager in his presence. I could not forbear giving him sly glances now and then, to see how he acted when he believed himself unobserved, but he was ever the same, a passive, diligent, unexcitable worker. This continual beating against the stone wall, for thus I regarded it, became at last almost unendurable. Clavering shy, and the secretary unapproachable. How was I to gain anything? The short interviews I had with Mary did not help matters. Haughty, constrained, feverish, pettish, grateful, appealing, everything at once, and never twice the same. I learned to dread, even while I coveted, an interview. She appeared to be passing through some crisis which occasioned her the keenest suffering. I have seen her, when she thought herself alone, throw up her hands with the gesture which we use to ward off a coming evil, or shut out some hideous vision. I have likewise beheld her standing with her proud head abased, her nervous hands drooping, her whole form sinking and inert, as if the pressure of a weight she could neither upbear nor cast aside had robbed her even of the show of resistance. But this was only once. Ordinarily she was at least stately in her trouble. Even when the softest appeal came into her eyes, she stood erect, and retained her expression of conscious power. Even the night she met me in the hall with feverish cheeks and lips trembling with eagerness, only to turn and fly again without giving utterance to what she had to say, she comported herself with a fiery dignity that was well nigh imposing. That all this meant something I was sure, and so I kept my patience alive, with the hope that some day she would make a revelation. Those quivering lips would not always remain closed. The secret involving Eleanor's honour and happiness would be divulged by this restless being, if by no one else. Nor was the memory of that extraordinary, if not cruel, accusation I had heard her make enough to destroy this hope. For hope it had grown to be, so that I found myself insensibly shortening my time with Mr. Harwell in the library, and extending my tête-à-tête visits with Mary in the reception room, till the imperturbable secretary was forced to complain that he was often left for hours without work. But, as I say, days passed, and a second Monday evening came round without seeing me any further advanced upon the problem I had set myself to solve than when I first started upon it 2 weeks before. The subject of the murder had not even been broached, nor was Hannah spoken of, though I observed the papers were not allowed to languish an instant upon the stoop, mistress and servants betraying equal interest in their contents. All this was strange to me. It was as if you saw a group of human beings eating, drinking, and sleeping upon the sides of a volcano, hot with a late eruption, and trembling with the birth of a new one. I longed to break this silence as we shiver glass, by shouting the name of Eleanor through those gilded rooms and satin-draped vestibules. But this Monday evening I was in a calmer mood. I was determined to expect nothing from my visits to Mary Leavenworth's house, and entered it upon the eve in question with an equanimity such as I had not experienced since the first day I passed under its unhappy portals. But when, upon nearing the reception room, I saw Mary pacing the floor with the air of one who is restlessly awaiting something or somebody, I took a sudden resolution, and advancing towards her, said, "Do I see you alone, Miss Leavenworth?" She paused in her hurried action, blushed and bowed, but, contrary to her usual custom, did not bid me enter. "Will it be too great an intrusion on my part if I venture to come in?" I asked. Her glance flashed uneasily to the clock, and she seemed about to excuse herself, but suddenly yielded, and, drawing up a chair before the fire, motioned me towards it. Though she endeavored to appear calm, I vaguely felt I had chanced upon her in one of her most agitated moods, and that I had only to broach the subject I had in mind to behold her haughtiness disappear before me like melting snow. I also felt that I had but few moments in which to do it. I accordingly plunged immediately into the subject. "Miss Leavenworth," said I, "in obtruding upon you to night, I have a purpose other than that of giving myself a pleasure. I have come to make an appeal." Instantly I saw that in some way I had started wrong. "An appeal to make to me?" she asked, breathing coldness from every feature of her face. "Yes," I went on with passionate recklessness. "Balked in every other endeavor to learn the truth, I have come to you, whom I believe to be noble at the core, for that help which seems likely to fail us in every other direction, for the word which, if it does not absolutely save your cousin, will at least put us upon the track of what will." "I do not understand what you mean," she protested, slightly shrinking. "Miss Leavenworth," I pursued, "it is needless for me to tell you in what position your cousin stands. You, who remember both the form and drift of the questions put to her at the inquest, comprehend it all without any explanation from me. But what you may not know is this, that unless she is speedily relieved from the suspicion which, justly or not, has attached itself to her name, the consequences which such suspicion entails must fall upon her, and—" "Good God!" she cried, "you do not mean that she will be—" "Subject to arrest? Yes." It was a blow. Shame, horror, and anguish were in every line of her white face. "And all because of that key," she murmured. "Key? How did you know anything about a key?" "Why," she cried, flushing painfully, "I cannot say. Didn't you tell me?" "No," I returned. "The papers, then?" "The papers have never mentioned it." She grew more and more agitated. "I thought every one knew. No, I did not either," she avowed, in a sudden burst of shame and penitence. "I knew it was a secret, but, oh, Mr. Raymond, it was Eleanor herself who told me." "Eleanor?" "Yes, that last evening she was here. We were together in the drawing room." "What did she tell?" "That the key to the library had been seen in her possession." I could scarcely conceal my incredulity. Eleanor, conscious of the suspicion with which her cousin regarded her, inform that cousin of a fact calculated to add weight to that suspicion. I could not believe this. "But you knew it," Mary went on. "I have revealed nothing I ought to have kept secret." "No," said I; "and, Miss Leavenworth, it is this thing which makes your cousin's position absolutely dangerous. It is a fact that, left unexplained, must ever link her name with infamy. A bit of circumstantial evidence no sophistry can smother, and no denial obliterate. Only her hitherto spotless reputation and the efforts of one who, notwithstanding appearances, believes in her innocence, keeps her so long from the clutch of the officers of justice. That key, and the silence preserved by her in regard to it, is sinking her slowly into a pit from which the utmost endeavours of her best friends will soon be inadequate to extricate her." "And you tell me this?" "That you may have pity on the poor girl, who will not have pity on herself, and by the explanation of a few circumstances which cannot be mysteries to you, assist in bringing her from under the dreadful shadow that threatens to overwhelm her." "And would you insinuate, sir," she cried, turning upon me with a look of great anger, "that I know any more than you do of this matter? That I possess any knowledge which I have not already made public concerning the dreadful tragedy which has transformed our home into a desert, our existence into a lasting horror? Has the blight of suspicion fallen upon me too, and have you come to accuse me in my own house?" "Miss Leavenworth," I entreated, "calm yourself. I accuse you of nothing. I only desire you to enlighten me as to your cousin's probable motive for this criminating silence. You cannot be ignorant of it. You are her cousin, almost her sister, have been at all events her daily companion for years, and must know for whom or for what she seals her lips, and conceals facts which, if known, would direct suspicion to the real criminal. That is, if you really believe what you have hitherto stated, that your cousin is an innocent woman." She is not making any answer to this. I rose and confronted her. "Miss Leavenworth, do you believe your cousin guiltless of this crime or not?"
"Guiltless? Eleanore? Oh, my God, if all the world were only as innocent as she!"
"Then," said I, "you must likewise believe that if she refrains from speaking in regard to matters which to ordinary observers ought to be explained, she does it only from motives of kindness towards one less guiltless than herself."
"What? No, no, I do not say that. What made you think of any such explanation?"
"The action itself. With one of Eleanor's character, such conduct as hers admits of no other construction. Either she is mad, or she is shielding another at the expense of herself." Mary's lip, which had trembled, slowly steadied itself.
"And whom have you settled upon as the person for whom Eleanor thus sacrifices herself?"
"Ah," said I, "there is where I seek assistance from you. With your knowledge of her history—" But Mary Leavenworth, sinking haughtily back into her chair, stopped me with a quiet gesture.
"I beg your pardon," said she, "but you make a mistake. I know little or nothing of Eleanor's personal feelings. The mystery must be solved by some one besides me."
I changed my tactics. "When Eleanor confessed to you that the missing key had been seen in her possession, did she likewise inform you where she obtained it, and for what reason she was hiding it?"
"No."
"Merely told you the fact without any explanation?"
"Yes."
Was not that a strange piece of gratuitous information for her to give one who, but a few hours before, had accused her face to face of committing a deadly crime?
"What do you mean?"
she asked, her voice suddenly sinking. "You will not deny that you were once not only ready to believe her guilty, but that you actually charged her with having perpetrated this crime?"
"Explain yourself!" she cried.
"Miss Leavenworth, do you not remember what you said in that room upstairs, when you were alone with your cousin on the morning of the inquest, just before Mr. Gryce and myself entered your presence?" Her eyes did not fall, but they filled with sudden terror.
"You heard?"
she whispered. "I could not help it. I was just outside the door, and—"
"What did you hear?"
I told her.
"And Mr. Gryce?"
"He was at my side." It seemed as if her eyes would devour my face.
"Yet nothing was said when you came in?"
"No."
"You, however, have never forgotten it?"
"How could we, Miss Leavenworth?" Her head fell forward in her hands, and for one wild moment she seemed lost in despair. Then she roused, and desperately exclaimed:
"And that is why you come here to-night? With that sentence written upon your heart, you invade my presence, torture me with questions."
"Pardon me," I broke in. "Are my questions such as you, with reasonable regard for the honor of one with whom you are accustomed to associate, should hesitate to answer? Do I derogate from my manhood in asking you how and why you came to make an accusation of so grave a nature at a time when all the circumstances of the case were freshly before you, only to insist fully as strongly upon your cousin's innocence when you found there was even more cause for your imputation than you had supposed?" She did not seem to hear me.
"Oh, my cruel fate!" she murmured. "Oh, my cruel fate!"
"Miss Leavenworth," said I, rising and taking my stand before her, "although there is a temporary estrangement between you and your cousin, you cannot wish to seem her enemy. Speak, then. Let me at least know the name of him for whom she thus immolates herself. A hint from you—" But rising, with a strange look, to her feet, she interrupted me with a stern remark.
"If you do not know, I cannot inform you. Do not ask me, Mr. Raymond."
And she glanced at the clock for the second time. I took another turn. "Miss Leavenworth, you once asked me if a person who had committed a wrong ought necessarily to confess it, and I replied, no, unless by the confession reparation could be made. Do you remember?" Her lips moved, but no words issued from them. "I begin to think," I solemnly proceeded, following the lead of her emotion, "that confession is the only way out of this difficulty. That only by the words you can utter Eleanore can be saved from the doom that awaits her. Will you not then show yourself a true woman by responding to my earnest entreaties?" I seemed to have touched the right chord, for she trembled, and a look of wistfulness filled her eyes.
"Oh, if I could!" she murmured.
"And why can you not? You will never be happy till you do. Eleanore persists in silence, but that is no reason why you should emulate her example. You only make her position more doubtful by it."
"I know it, but I cannot help myself. Fate has too strong a hold upon me. I cannot break away."
"That is not true. Any one can escape from bonds imaginary as yours."
"No, no," she protested. "You do not understand."
"I understand this, that the path of rectitude is a straight one, and that he who steps into devious byways is going astray." A nicker of light, pathetic beyond description, flashed for a moment across her face. Her throat rose as with one wild sob, her lips opened, she seemed yielding, when a sharp ring at the front door bell.
"Oh!"
she cried, sharply turning.
"Tell him I cannot see him. Tell him—"
"Miss Leavenworth," said I, taking her by both hands, "never mind the door, never mind anything but this. I have asked you a question which involves the mystery of this whole affair. Answer me then, for your soul's sake. Tell me what the unhappy circumstances were which could induce you—" But she tore her hands from mine.
"The door!" she cried. "It will open, and—"
Stepping into the hall, I met Thomas coming up the basement stairs. "Go back," said I. "I will call you when you are wanted." With a bow he disappeared.
"You expect me to answer?" she exclaimed when I re entered. "Now? In a moment? I cannot."
"But—"
"Impossible!"
fastening her gaze upon the front door. "Miss Leavenworth!" She shuddered. "I fear the time will never come if you do not speak now."
"Impossible!"
she reiterated. Another twang at the bell.
"You hear?"
said she. I went into the hall and called Thomas. "You may open the door now," said I, and moved to return to her side. But with a gesture of command she pointed upstairs.
"Leave me,"
and her glance passed on to Thomas, who stopped where he was. "I will see you again before I go," said I, and hastened upstairs. Thomas opened the door. "Is Miss Leavenworth in?" I heard a rich, tremulous voice inquire. "Yes, sir," came in the butler's most respectful and measured accents, and leaning over the banisters I beheld, to my amazement, the form of Mr. Clavering enter the front hall and move towards the reception room.
Okay, so there was a lot that got discussed in this chapter. This is one of those chapters that I've gone back and listened to a couple of times, and even doing that, I continued to find that I missed stuff, and I went back and read it in print as well. There's actually a lot of foreshadowing. One of the most important parts of this chapter, though, is where the word sophistry comes into play. When Raymond said, "It is the thing which makes your cousin's position absolutely dangerous." This is the key. "It is a fact that left unexplained must ever link her name with infamy." And then he says, "A bit of circumstantial evidence no sophistry can smother and no denial obliterate." This is the moment that made this book get picked up by Yale Law School and used at the time, because it is such an enormous, at the end, refutation of circumstantial evidence. Absolutely everything in this book is going to continue pointing where it is pointing right now, but it is all circumstantial. The fact that Mary cannot clarify anything that Raymond is asking her about in this chapter foreshadows everything. This is the chapter. If at the end of the book you want to come back and read one, bookmark this sucker. Put a little star and favorite this episode, because this is the one you're going to want to come back and listen to again, because so much is exposed but unexposed in this chapter. It's a great chapter. I love this chapter. There are a couple other places where there's just, it's just great foreshadowing. I love it. One of Raymond's statements, "With one of Eleanor's characters, such conduct as hers admits of no other construction. Either she is mad or she is shielding another at the expense of herself." Those are the only two choices Raymond can see. And Raymond is a lawyer. And Anna Catherine Green knew what she was talking about. And then eventually Mary comes back with, "You make a mistake. I know little or nothing of Eleanor's personal feelings. The mystery must be solved by someone besides me." Mary is not going to be the one who is able to tell us whether or not Eleanor is guilty. And then, of course, by the end of the chapter, Mary she's been weird the whole time. She was weird when Raymond came in. She's weird towards the end. The doorbell rings. There's this weird dance with Thomas, like coming in, going out. He's not able to answer the door. He is able to answer the door. Finally, Raymond calls him in to answer the door. Raymond is the one who says to Mary, "I will speak to you after." And he goes upstairs. He hits the road, but he doesn't leave the house. He can't leave the house because there's somebody outside the front door that Mary clearly does not want him to see. And being a gentleman, he excuses himself upstairs where he can be safely out of the way in the study. But being Raymond and being our narrator, of course he's going to have to see who it is who walks in the door. And it is Mr. Clavering, who he has lost touch with, who seems to be onto him, trying to, like, Raymond's been trying to hit him up as, "Hey, we should be pals," by going to the same club. Hasn't worked. Clavering walks in the door here. So something's going on, and we are not going to find out about it this week. Ha ha ha. All right. I hope you enjoyed this chapter. I'm loving this book. I am so glad to hear that you are as well. Kim, I am totally down on you doing Nancy Drew. That would be awesome. The second that thing becomes public domain, let's do it. I think it'd be a lot of fun. All right. Have a great week. I will talk to you soon. Be well. Take care of each other. Take care of your families and your friends. Wear a mask. Get a vaccine. Get a booster shot if you can. I'll talk to you soon. Take care. Bye. If you like what you hear on Craftlit, please review us on iTunes, like us on Facebook, join in the fun in our Facebook group, which is Craftlit Annotated Audiobooks. Always the nicest group of people you're going to find on Facebook, and the place where you can come to and say, nobody else was going to understand this, but I knew you all would. And of course, thank you for your support of Craftlit. And remember, if your hands are too busy to pick up a book, at least you can turn one on.